Hello and welcome back to another episode. Now, this morning, I have to admit, I'm feeling a little under the weather. In fact, you might say I'm a bit zombified. But because of that, I was reminded that actually I haven't finalised my Z or Z plan for this current place where I'm living. The last four moves, I've always, as a fun mental exercise, put together my zombie apocalypse sort of action plan. And we just haven't had time since we moved into this particular house to do that. So this morning I put my finishing touches on the notes for where I'm currently living, and I figured I might as well share them with you in this video. Now, as always, I'm going to be basing my Z plan on the excellent Zombie Survival Guide by Max Brooks. I'm not going to go through every single step which he recommends, mainly because I don't want to be here all day, but there's some excellent thinking and thoughts in here if you want to pick that up. Frankly, I'm sure most of you have already got a copy. But essentially, I'm going to be thinking about surviving, as Max defines, a class 1 through to 3 outbreak. That is an outbreak which starts off maybe locally and then spreads to sort of like a portion of an urban area or a rural area, and then spreads to a whole region, maybe even a country. That's the sort of range that I'm going to be thinking about today. And as I sort of go from step to step, really my thought process is along the lines of, I suppose, practical survival. I'm not necessarily interested in doing world rebuilding in my plan, at least not initially. So the great thing is, starting off in a class 1 outbreak, if it was just, for example, just down the street or something, and there's some zombies around, and it's the local officials aren't really acknowledging the outbreak, some reports of a couple of murders or something, then in that sort of scenario, we're actually in quite a good situation where we are in this particular house. The house that we live in fact, the house that we bought, in fact, is a converted flat, or rather flat. It's two flats, and this is something which you get in the northeast of England, the so-called Tyneside flats. So the space upstairs is sort of designed, obviously it's been remodeled, but it's sort of designed to be, in terms of square footage, a livable space. So for example, the bathroom is quite large. In fact, it's oddly large because it used to be a kitchen. So we could actually move, in that scenario, quite a lot of our cooking equipment and that kind of thing upstairs, so like the microwave, kettle, all this kind of thing, and have running water, at least at first, and be able to survive quite well. We also happen to have a ladder up there because we need to be able to get into the attic. So what we do probably is we chop up the stairs. This is one of the standards of surviving a zombie apocalypse, is chopping the stairs so only the ground floor is accessible to the undead. And I reckon we could survive up there, at least in the short term, fairly well. Obviously, we'd fill up all of the vessels that we could with water, so like the bath, buckets, boxes, all this kind of thing. And if the water ran out, then actually there's even a skylight in the roof where we could set up a system to catch rain. So I think we'd be okay in the short term. Just around the corner, in fact, about 100 metres away, is a shopping superstore, like a big store full of food, which would probably be ransacked, I know that, in the early days of an outbreak, but it would be worthwhile going on a run. And also, as well, there's a shop, well, 2 or 3 shops actually within spitting distance, and a social club, which actually itself is a mini fortress. So not only would we be able to get, for example, some alcohol there if we really wanted it, although maybe drinking isn't a great idea in a zombie apocalypse, but also as well, actually, if things got really bad, we might be able to move into that because they have lockable doors. It's a little secure environment, again, with a substantial upstairs and a downstairs which you can cut off using these sort of great big sort of grated gates that you can put a padlock on. So that's a good initial thought in terms of survival. We'd be okay until things got a bit worse. Now, one of the great things is actually also we have lots of things which would help with, I guess, the next step. The next step really is moving away, trying to find somewhere that's safer, that's a bit more secure. And we have some great things because we have, for example, me being an archaeologist and also someone who does lots of talking about the past in my job, we have things like Viking swords lying around. I have a Roman sword. We have spears. We have chainmail armour. This kind of thing. Now, I'm not a reenactor or a massive enthusiast, so we don't have tons of it, but we have enough to kit out one or two people to survive fairly well, and also crucially fairly quietly in small-scale skirmishes. So if we sharpen up the weaponry, put on some chainmail, a couple of helmets or something, I think we'd be okay in getting to the next step. With us, we have lots of gadgets like wind-up lights as well. We often go camping, so we have some basic camping equipment and camping skills. We wouldn't need too much in the way of batteries, although it'd be really painful to leave behind, for example, my 3DS. But this is about surviving a zombie apocalypse, not about getting another street pass, as it were. And also, actually, as well, my wife is a really keen gardener, so we'd be able to bring seeds, for example, with us. She has lots of fruit and vegetable seeds, all this kind of thing. So we could have the makings of a nice little place to live, all within our house. So actually, I think we'd be okay in that first step. Now, we'd wait for a lull, as it were, in the sort of stage 1 to stage 2 kind of scenario where it starts to spread. We'd wait for a bit of there'd be initial chaos, I imagine, then a lull after all the looting has died down. Maybe people have been, the living have been thinned out a little bit, and then we'd make a run for it. But what we'd do, I think this is quite clever, is we wouldn't use the roads. We would cycle along the so-called Hadrian Cycleway. Now, the cycleway runs from where we live in Wallsend all the way across the country, in fact, all the way to Carlisle. But at least I think it does. But in this instance, actually, we'd go the other way. We'd go 3 miles, actually, out to the coast. And we'd try and maybe hold up in a place called Tynemouth. Now, Tynemouth, as the name implies, is where the River Tyne, which is the river that runs through Newcastle in the northeast, comes in from the sea. It's the inlet, the outlet for that river, and it has a couple of advantages. First of all, Tynemouth has this outcrop of rock, which has historically been fortified, and in fact today there's the ruins of a priory, and crucially the ruins of I think it's early medieval and civil war eventually fort. Or still there. It's actually still basically secure. You can't climb in. You can't, at least as far as I'm aware, you can't just walk in. Certainly not when they're closed. This place would be fortifiable, and undoubtedly, of course, local residents, some of them would have already thought of that and tried to move in. But we'd try and negotiate, maybe with our seeds or something, to get into Tynemouth Priory, which I think would do us quite well. For a couple of reasons. First of all, locally you've got the Tynemouth shopping shops, the high street, and also just up the coast, places like Whitley Bay. You can just make little runs and get food and resources from those places. And because we're moving away from the city out towards the coast, hopefully there'd be less in the way of less density in terms of looters and people who have been ransacking these shops. So hopefully we'd be getting more likely to be able to pick up food as we go. Now, one of the best things about that location, obviously it's fortifiable. We could, if we really wanted to, try and settle down there. Depends how bad the zombie outbreak is. But also, actually, it's literally on one of the main shipping lanes in and out of Britain. There are ferries going across the North Sea all the time, places like Amsterdam to Scandinavia, but also as well we have goods coming into the port of Tyne as well. So there might be a possibility of hitching a ride, or at the very least getting resources from maybe a tanker or something, or a ship which is carrying lots of shipping containers, and you'll be able to monitor that stuff. So we might become part pirate, I guess, part hitchhiker, but it depends really on how things pan out. At the very least, either on the river or just up the coast, there'll be the opportunity to get hold of a small boat or yacht, and that would be, if necessary, the other branch. So either get on a ferry and potentially isolate ourselves in the North Sea along with hundreds of other people and then maybe sink. That's a bit dangerous, I guess. Or get our own little boat and instead head north. Now, my thinking there is that as we head further north, the weather becomes more and more manky and horrible. But the zombies, as it were, are less likely to, I guess, to survive long. Not only are there less of them, because actually the population is less dense the further north you go, especially in Northumberland, but also there's no shelter for the undead, so they'd be wandering the fields or the small towns, and they'd be less likely to survive. Yes, okay, you can make the argument that further south, for example in London, it's hotter, and therefore they're a lot more likely to rot sooner, but there's a lot more environmental elements, especially in big cities, which mean that zombies actually could be sheltered from the worst of the weather in big buildings. But I think the further north we go, the further towards, for example, towards Scotland, especially in that hinterland between the borders and Edinburgh, actually it'd be really difficult for a zombie to survive outside. And there'd be less people. That's the other thing as well, less humans. So the population is less dense, therefore less people for us to compete with, and less people to be turned into zombies. So I think heading north would be the plan. And at this point, I think we'd probably make a go at settling on Lindisfarne. Now, Lindisfarne is also known as Holy Isle or Holy Island, and it's connected to the mainland by a tidal estuary, I believe. So the sea comes in twice a day and floods the place, and keeps this island separate from the mainland, which is useful. It's also really hard to walk across if you don't know where to walk. So if you are the undead, you may well get up to your knees and get trapped and then get washed away by the sea. So that's kind of useful. But also as well, there's a castle. Again, there's a castle on Lindisfarne, which we could very easily fortify and keep people out of. Also, obviously, keep the undead out of. So actually, again, we might have to go there and negotiate, but I think by then we might have vegetables that we've grown or something in Tynemouth and be able to make our way into that community. Now, notice I'm not really looking to be the leader of any of these communities, so I won't be looking to overthrow anyone. At least not unless they were actually dangerous, as it were, for making terrible survival decisions. So hopefully, with the good stuff that we'd bring, the experience that we have, and also I suppose the right attitude, we'll be able to make it into these communities. But anyway, so Lindisfarne Castle, I think, could be a great spot to fortify. There are a couple of shops on the island. It is relatively isolated, and who knows, this is level 3, so a whole region has been overtaken by zombies, but maybe you might be able to survive there until they're mopped up. But if things get worse, if we enter like a level 4 scenario, a class 4 scenario, as Max Brooks defines it, where the whole world, a world of the undead, occurs, then actually Lindisfarne would be a good spot to make a stand, as it were, to be fairly isolated, but not so isolated that if, for example, you're on a ferry and it sinks, then you're buggered. You can still get away. So we'd always be ready, I think, in that scenario to make a run for the Scottish Islands, so Shetland, Orkney, maybe even, depends on how good we were at sailing by this stage, going around the north coast and going to one of the islands on the Outer Hebrides, this kind of thing. But unless, again, getting more isolated, getting worse weather, very deliberately making it so that actually the undead have a harder time literally staying together. Hopefully the wind and the rain and the landscape would just slow them down and just exacerbate their rotting status. And as I say, also a less dense population means less potential zombies. The other advantage of Lindisfarne is that it has a working fishing inlet. It has a small fishing community, indeed a small fleet, I suppose you could call it. So there's lots of fishing gear and equipment, so we could hopefully go and do some fishing, but also crucially lots of industrial elements, things like netting and metallic useful objects, whether they're tools or simply material that could be repurposed, which could be useful for the purposes of fortifying the castle, but also for surviving, for example, for going fishing or just making traps, as it were, for maybe to catch animals, or even just to deter the bandits and looters who would be out in the world. So there you go, that's my Z plan, as it were. It is one which depends on isolation for survival, and one which I wouldn't want to trust too many people. So obviously my wife would be with me, and obviously if we have a child by then or two, our pets perhaps could be useful. I think our dog Indy might be a good early warning system. maybe. But also some limited friends and family as well. Those who are not only good friends but also happen to be useful, would be useful, as it were, by definition. So, for example, I have a very good friend who is actually a machinist and maker of things. So I think we'd invite him into our party as well. So yeah, there you go. And hopefully we'll be able to survive the worst of certainly the class 2 and 3 outbreaks, and who knows, maybe even make a go of surviving as a small community on the edge of the once proud civilization of man, but now overrun by zombies. Who knows? There you go, guys. That's my Z plan, and as I say, very much inspired by some of the thinking in the Zombie Survival Guide. There are some things in here which I really like. I mean, for example, he goes into detail about actively training yourself. So, for example, reading books on electrical engineering, this kind of thing, which actually is a good idea. Just in general, you know. I mean, who knows what sort of situation one might find oneself in. So, actually, this isn't just fiction. It's actually quite a good guide to being prepared. You know, it's kind of like a scout's guide, but with zombies. So I like it. What's your Z plan? Do you have any Z plans? Feel free to comment below or make a video response. I would love to hear, and maybe we could learn from each other. But obviously, if you try and steal from me, I will have to deal with you. Definitely. Anyway, guys, as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.